Test.
All right, good evening, everyone. I call tonight's meeting to order for July 25th, 2024. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba? Okay, I was going to say, and give me names. Griffin? Griffith. My apologies. Griffith. And the other name? Amber.
Ambergy, present.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next on our agenda is our meeting minutes. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the minutes. Any revisions, changes to the minutes? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, what were the names on the motions? Parsons first. Okay. Give a second. Okay, Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith? Yes. Mr. Ambergy?
Abstain.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our first public hearing this evening, I was informed that Mr. Esposito has withdrawn the application. We were informed that we will need to take a motion to accept withdrawal. So unless there's any other comments, I would just ask for a motion.
I move to withdraw it.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Parsons? Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba? Yes. Ms. Griffith? Yes. Mr. Ambergy?
Yes.
Okay. Next, we do come to our public hearing. This is a request by applicant David Cabernet, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, on behalf of Oak Street Health for approval of an amendment to a development plan at 4778 Roosevelt Boulevard. And I'll let you take the case from here.
Great, thank you. So I'll be providing the staff reports for you. For those that I haven't met, my name is Brody Conover. I'm an assistant law director for the city, but during some staff transition, we'll be serving as staff to you guys tonight. So this application tonight is for an amendment to a final development plan. Currently, this is it's a plan development zoning. It's planned O-1P plan development. The applicant is seeking to put in a medical office. It's going to be, you see the screen in front of you, to the right of Harbor Freight in the vacant area. But under the current plan development, a medical office is not a permitted use. So the applicant is essentially seeking permission to amend the plan development to allow for the medical office. So I have not looked at this PowerPoint. I should have done that. I've looked at the staff report. So we're going to walk through this together. So as I mentioned, the property is presently zoned O-1P plan development. I think this was done in the mid to late 80s. So it's been this way for a long time. When I think the strip plaza was built, you can see on the map there in the middle, it's kind of in the middle of this existing plaza. The PD was originally approved for office space and retail. Again, that this would not be, medical office would not be permitted. Staff analysis, that's great. So that's the original staff analysis from the 80s. We'll skip that since I said it already. So I will say this to you guys. I typically do not just read word for word the PowerPoints. I'm not going to read every review criteria. If there's anything you would like me to go into more depth with, please do let me know. I'm happy to. There's not a dumb question, anything like that. But I do, otherwise we could be here for hours, and I don't want that, and I don't think you do either. So I'm going to summarize a lot what's on the screen in front of you. It's in the staff report, which you've already received. I do want to mention that public notice did go out. It was in the Journal News. All property owners within 200 feet received notice. There's no comments from other staff departments at this time, which is not uncommon with a plan development amendment. So the plan developments, as you all know, are essentially a way for the city to, create a zoning district that you can use however you want. So this is, I think, qualifying as a major change to the plan development because it's a change of the use. And so that is why it is in front of you. It will then subsequently go to approval to City Council with your guys' recommendation attached to it. And so because it's the change in the use of the property is why it's before you. So medical offices are generally permitted in most business and office districts. I think under the 2022 comprehensive plan, which, here we go, this area is identified as a neighborhood mixed use. So the intended purpose under the city's comp plan from just a couple years ago is small scale commercial office, medical, and service uses that cater to the surrounding residential neighborhoods, which there are some secondary uses that do permit residential. So this is kind of the drawings and specs for the property. You can see just to the south, which if you were looking at the original picture to the left is Harbor Freight, but then this is the property. It's going to be primarily office suites, a bullpen. There is a kind of loading dock in the back that allows rear entrance, but the front entrances will be as already there as shown on the plans. Here are the review criteria. Again, you're just essentially looking for, is this appropriate within the area? Again, I don't know if there's a staff recommendation. Oh, here we go. The development committee reviewed the proposal. The construction plans obviously will need to comply with the engineering manual. They'll have to get building permits and things like that. But based upon the staff report, the application, and the evidence before you all, staff's recommendation is to approve this amendment to the final development plan for 4778 Roosevelt Boulevard in Middletown for the use of this to be a medical office. I think Oak Street Health is the intended name for it. So if there's any questions, happy to answer those for you all. This seems pretty straightforward.
Do we know what kind of medical office it is?
No, I don't. Is the applicant here? Oh, yep. So the applicant will be here. She'll be able to answer a heck of a lot more than I can. Okay. So again, I'm coming in with about 24 hours heads up on this. So, but yeah, so appreciate staff's work on preparing the reports and the PowerPoint. But otherwise, I think the applicant may know that a heck of a lot better than I might.
Okay.
Any other questions before I open the public hearing? Okay. This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Swear you in. Just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Macy Downey. Address is 5721 Dragon Way, Cincinnati, Ohio.
You swear the testimony you're about to give the board is the truth, the whole truth,
Yes. Okay, I'll just give a little spiel and then I can answer some questions. I'm here on behalf of Oak Street Health tonight. I'm with McBride Dale Clarion. We are their planning and zoning consultant for this project. Oak Street Health is a primary care center that's geared toward older adults, specifically adults on Medicare. As you can see from the floor plan, I think the majority of the space is dedicated towards the exam rooms, consultation rooms. There's a lab, some employee space, and then in the front there they have a little community room. And in that community room they do some events and provide internet access, and just like a socialization space for patients. They are planning on a roughly $2 million investment in this, and anticipate about 45 employees. So as far as the zoning is concerned, we do feel that the medical office use is, upholds the intent and the spirit of the zoning code. The O1 district, we're in the O1P district. The O1 district does permit the medical clinics and office use. And looking at the comp plan, I think that states that the neighborhood mixed use is primarily for small scale office, medical, service, commercial uses that are surrounded by neighborhoods, which is exactly what we're looking at here. The modifications to the building are mostly interior. I don't think you'll notice any exterior modifications other than some new signage for just identification. Parking sufficient. The loading docks are in the rear, out of view from the right-of-way, screened from the rear residential. So really feel like it's a good spot for Oak Street to move in. And I know they're eager to get started and join your community. So I can answer any other questions you guys may have.
I just had a general question. With Oak Street Health, is it focused, is it primary care, or is it more, is there a specialty there for Oak Street Health?
It's primary care, yes.
Okay.
There's not a current location in Middletown, no. So we'd be new, or they would be new.
Do you have a location? You have a location in Dayton, I believe, right? Is that correct? Or?
I'm not aware. Sorry.
Can you tell us what the, what the plan is for it? I noticed 650 square feet for a future pharmacy. Is that for their clientele only? It's not going to be a public walk-in circumstance?
I'm not sure what their future plans are for that space. I don't know that I can answer who would be, and I guess, going in that space.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We can move to deliberations. I know we've seen staff recommendation already. Do we have any other questions or any other discussion about this particular case? Are we ready to have a motion at this point? Okay. I'll make a motion. And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Daniel,
Yes.
Mr. Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Cash, Mr. Duba, Ms. Griffith, Mr. Ambergy,
Yes.
Great. Okay, this moves us now to our text amendments. Consideration of text amendments for the Development Code pertaining to Chapter 1204, zoning districts, 1204.3, and 1210, architectural standards. So there's a number of those. I'll turn things over to staff at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So tonight before you all, there are a number of text amendments to the, and I'm just skipping through. I'm actually going to talk about these, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm looking at the correct ones. So there are 4 text amendments before you tonight. The first one we will talk about is, this one has been, it's marijuana. It has been, I don't know how much detail to get into, so I'll just start from the start. So there had been a plan directed largely by City Council to permit medical marijuana and potentially adult use cannabis, which is recreational marijuana, within the city limits. There has been a long-standing prohibition on possessing and using selling medical marijuana within the city. There's been a ban statewide until last fall on adult use or recreational marijuana. So city staff we had worked to put together a plan at City Council's direction to essentially work to find ways to allow that, again, at City Council's direction within the city. Last month, the mayor's probably remembers better than I do, behind me, maybe 6 weeks ago, City Council directed staff to, the original plan was to go through modifying the development code. That's why we're here. But 6 weeks ago or so, City Council decided to go ahead and revoke the prohibition on the medical marijuana sale. And so we still are going forward with the path that we are currently on of modifying the development code to allow or to clarify where the permitted use of medical marijuana dispensaries and adult use cannabis dispensaries would be permitted within the city. There's a set of state regulations that regulate how close they can be to, for example, schools, churches, playgrounds, parks, things like that. But this would essentially, like any other principally permitted use, which is what the first text amendment gets at, is where it will be permitted. I don't think it's, yes, it is on this list. So it would permit medical marijuana dispensaries primarily within office space or in business districts within the city. They still would have to comply with every other sort of, development code regulation. And I keep saying dispensary. It's not exclusive to dispensary. Dispensaries will be the most, I guess, widespread permitted uses. There also are cultivators, processors, kind of on the manufacturing side of it, the growing side of it. And those will be in testing sites. We can't really regulate like the research and development as much, but the processors and cultivators would essentially be regulated like any other industry warehouse, because I don't know how familiar you are with the medical marijuana and adult use cannabis. They are highly regulated by the state. The security at these buildings is the most secure building in the city, I bet, or close to it. And so that is what is before you on text amendment number 1. So as you know, it is legal now in the state to have these. Local jurisdictions have the ability to prohibit or limit them. I believe City Council is still looking at, or maybe has recently passed, a prohibition on the number, or a limit on the number of dispensaries within the city specifically. And I know that there was numbers between 3, 4, and 5, and I just don't remember the exact number. 3 is, I think, what they landed on. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Todd. And I'm sure, again, the mayor's telling these things behind me. I just can't see her. My son believes I have eyes in the back of my head, but she does not. So the text amendment, though, is really just to update the table in the development code to identify where those will be permitted and where they won't. And the strategy behind it was, again, that this will allow us to control where they are located within the city, in addition to the limitations in the state law that limits them being near schools, churches, parks, libraries, and playgrounds, and things like that. So that is the first text amendment before you all. The second text amendment.
Shouldn't we talk about these?
Happy to.
Individually?
Yeah, totally. Happy to do that. Yeah, please. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over them. Yeah.
I was going to say, this is the one that we'll probably...
Yeah, this is good. I know. That's not why I was skipping over it.
I don't have any real serious questions, but I know that these facilities have to be licensed by the state.
That's right.
And I guess I'm surprised if this grid that we have is permitted versus permitted with conditions, or permitted with whatever the third one is. Because we're trying to limit it to 3 or 5 or whatever the number is, and in order to do that, I mean, later on, the state could pass out licenses to a dozen.
Well, so yes and no, right? So the way that it's working right now is we're an initial, so we have, I think the number is around 150 to 200 medical marijuana dispensaries statewide. The first round of applications for the adult use cannabis, which is recreational marijuana, awarded about 150 to 200 of those licenses, and they went first and exclusively to this point to medical marijuana dispensaries. So what I mean to say is that right now, it's very unlikely that you're going to get an adult use dispensary because we don't currently have a medical marijuana dispensary. Monroe down the street has 4 medical marijuana dispensaries. It's very likely that they now have 4, we call them dual use, because it's both, basically the left side of the store is marijuana or medical marijuana and the right side is adult use or recreational. So if we put a cap of 3, part of the state process is when you apply, you have to get a notice of proper zoning form. And what that says is that, hey, state, I can actually go where I'm intending to go. And that is why we won't end up with 12 licenses if we have a cap of 3.
Okay, but since it's permitted, I mean, if somebody brought it and they say they have the zoning approval and the state issues them a license, what do you do?
Well, we also will, the state will be aware that we have a cap of 3, right?
Okay.
Or 4 or 5 or whatever the number is now or in the future. So they won't issue licenses to a community where they are already at the cap.
It just seemed if you had conditional, you could control that a little better.
Yeah, I have a similar question, because what gives the city the right to cap at 3? I had assumed that it was through the zoning code. Is there some other?
There's a state statute that specifically authorizes local jurisdictions to impose a moratorium or a cap. So they can do a straight prohibition.
Outside of planning and zoning?
That's exactly right. And so that is why it will be if it isn't already, it will be a separate ordinance that says we are permitting 3 medical marijuana and 3 adult use cannabis dispensaries within the city. That is authorized under, I think it's like chapter 3787 or something like that. That it's under the medical marijuana and the adult use cannabis statutory schemes. So it has nothing to do with the zoning side of it.
Would there be public hearings before the city? Because the whole point of planning and zoning
Yep.
uses, the city gets a chance to say, I don't want a dispensary in my backyard. Right?
Yeah.
I feel that's important. I mean, this is not something that many people feel is a good thing for the community. So that's why I like it being conditional use, because people will have a chance to say their piece before it's either approved or denied. If this other method of the city giving out only 3 licenses also allows for that community engagement, I mean, it's less important. But I also, like you, would just assume we make it conditional use everywhere. And they have to come in here and explain why it's, should be permitted.
No, totally understand and appreciate that, Brian. I will say, so the short answer is it doesn't have the same exact public hearing process, because what happens is city council at the beginning says we are capping at 3. They're not saying which 3 or where those 3 are. They're just saying there's 3. Currently, that if they haven't done that, they're doing it soon. And currently, that would mean that these dispensaries are either, you classify them, there's a question about how we classify them. We had this debate with city council, or this conversation, not debate, this conversation with city council at a meeting a couple months ago. Is it a pharmacy? Is it a retail store? Is it a medical office? And so there's arguments to be made for all 3 of those. And that is why, as it stands right now, it's legal in the city, or very soon to be legal in the city, to have these. And they can go in any zoning district that permits a pharmacy, or that permits a medical use, or that permits a retail. And so there's arguments to be made against it, but I'm just telling you, I've dealt with this in other jurisdictions where these people have gobs of money and they're willing to sue to get there, because they can spend $250,000 on legal fees because they're going to make that in month 1. So they are incentivized to be very aggressive on the zoning side of things. And so that is why we wanted to outline them specifically in the development code as here is the medical marijuana dispensaries. Here are the adult use dispensaries. And then cultivators, processors. I think there's less concern, candidly, about those because it's a big warehouse or, yeah, it's right. You can't go in there and buy it or, and so I totally understand.
What will be the process for approving those 3 license holders?
Yeah, so that's where once we approve this or permit it, or don't, actually you have to take the affirmative step to prohibit it. Once we set the cap, take the affirmative step to set the cap, once we set up the zoning, which is, I think, always been staff's, or at least the law department's recommendation, because it gives you some more control, it really, we're pretty hands-off at that point, because we're willing to allow them, and we're going to allow 3. We're going to allow them in these zoning districts. It's very clearly in these zoning districts. But then after that, a lot of it just goes through the state. And so we don't have control necessarily of it's at 123 Main Street versus 123 Broadway. We don't have that kind of granular control like we wouldn't really necessarily with any business where it's a permitted use, right? So that's, I think, there will be, and I know that City Council has heard, there's been quite a bit of discussion, public comments on it generally, not specifically into this location, that location. I know staff has spent a significant amount of time. There's, I call it like a Swiss cheese map that they identified where, if you pick these 4 zoning districts and you take the restrictions from the state of it's a certain distance from schools and park, there's a very, very limited space of where these actually can be. And so that is why these zoning districts were identified to allow them to be permitted. So that way, also, it doesn't come to you guys, it doesn't necessarily have to come to council every single time, so.
But I mean, churches can move overnight.
Yeah, sure.
Can move. I just feel strongly like it should be conditional use so that there's an opportunity for the public to weigh in. I just feel very strongly. In conditional use, can you apply additional conditions? Like, I personally feel like if a marijuana dispensary is going to be built, it should be the nicest darn building in the area, right? So at least it's going to look nice, even if it might bring in people that.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's subject to the same exact, building code, zoning, or development code. Yeah.
Apply additional conditions upon approval.
Sure.
There is one fundamental difference, though. I mean, what we have in totality in the chart is one of the broadest use tables that I've seen. Okay, so if we're looking at this comparatively, and I'm asking us to just kind of take this, look at it broadly, look at it in its pieces in totality compared to other districts or other communities, this would be one of the broadest use tables I think that you would find in southwestern Ohio and potentially even the state of Ohio, because there's a couple of fundamental differences here. One being that while we have a cap at 3 on medical dispensaries, we're proposing dual use, and then there is no limitation on the processing, cultivation, or scientific testing. So what I'm saying is that many communities, for instance, Monroe, while they have 4 medical dispensaries, have chosen not to promote recreational. So that they've already prohibited that. And then the moratorium, for instance, if you look at OSU's law site, the Moritz College there, you're going to see a nice big table with lots of different details there. But what I'm saying is that, I mean, I've followed this issue pretty closely with council, watched the hearings, and I recognize that there's a great deal of interest to move this forward quickly. But I think one of the differences here, and I think I would agree that we have to at least have some conditional use. The problem that I see here is that in many of these areas, one of the great advantages, if we're thinking about having this new industry come to Middletown and create a market, one of the advantages, I think, as opposed to a P or permitted by right, is that we do have some, when we think about some ability to evaluate the types of businesses that are coming here, or the ability to at least ask questions about their facilities. For instance, with cultivators, if you do some research on cultivators, large warehouse facilities oftentimes have a lot of odors attached to them. And the filtration systems oftentimes sometimes are just not up to par. That's one of the most difficult parts of this industry, I think, is just looking at how they keep the smell without it going out into the broader community. If we accept just a table of Ps, then we lose the ability to ask those types of questions. We also lose the ability to even vet those facilities that may be coming here. How are we to determine what we might think would be a better company through competition, as opposed to saying, this is entirely done by the city staff, there is no review, and Planning Commission just stays out of the way. And I think in this particular industry, there are adverse, it's not a settled question that I'm not talking about whether or not it creates a pathway to drug use or not. I'm saying there are other adverse effects through these types of businesses. And to just have an entire table of Ps, I think that's my principal argument, is just that it's broad. It's very broad. So, when we're looking at, for instance, the testing lab, I'm not aware that we can actually place limitations there. I think ORC lays that out pretty clearly, that testing, so we could kind of narrow our discussion really in these first three categories. This table of Ps here, I don't think there's any room for us to argue about whether there's conditional use there at all. Where it gets a little more complicated, however, is that when, again, what I'm saying is that as we look at the table, and again, I'm not trying to argue with council. I know that there's been comments about Planning Commission thinking they have more powers than they do, those sorts of things. I don't think that's the issue here. I think what we're looking at is just trying to impose some level of accountability on the businesses that come in, and then also having a public hearing or moving to a conditional use allows us, one, to vet the types of businesses coming in as opposed to by right, permitted use. And then again, the processing side and cultivation, while that will be phased in, this will not happen immediately. It's the way the licensure process is going to work. We're not going to see these probably for a while. It's going to be a moment, but just to pass outright permitted uses, I think that we're forfeiting our role as Planning Commission to at least impose some structure on what's being asked here. It's equivalent of getting your cake and eating it too. So I would like to just give a couple examples, and then I knew this would just get complicated tonight. For instance, if you look at cultivators, and let's go to B3 through I2. If we just look at that section on the table, B3 through I2, that one current section there. So for instance, in 1204.3, when we talk about permitted uses, and I'm going to say this is by analogy that we've got this agricultural greenhouses and nurseries under I2, light industrial, both are prohibited, but here on the chart, they're both permitted. So I was just wondering, why are we not able to at least ask or vet the process there for any adverse impacts, particularly when we look at conditional use, the purpose of a conditional use. One of those in our code, as it is in all legal code, is the smells, the odors, whether or not that has an adverse impact on the community. Asking for conditional use does not get us into an argument with council about whether or not it should or should not be in the city. It's only saying, if there are other questions or potential adverse impacts to a community, why are we not able to ask those questions? That's the one thing I'm kind of questioning about this particular chart. So in the I2, again, light industrial is what was proposed in I1, I2. On the chart here, greenhouses or nurseries, they're not permitted at all in the current table. Here, we're talking about giving them, full by right permitted use. Then if you go down to dispensaries, B2 and B3, which is, again, full permitted use there, that would be an area, again, B2, B3, both general business districts. So if we follow the chart here, while they are heavily regulated, very secure, I agree with all those comments, And they are going to be regulated and secure by law. ORC is going to define what that will be. At the same time, this decision here in B2 and B3 in our two business districts, whether it's limited or expanded in both of these particular districts, the community has really no say at this point. There's no questions asked. It would be by right. Those two, I believe, should be conditional use. So if I'm looking at I1, I2, I would be looking at conditional use there. Possibly even when we're looking at cultivators, all three of those categories, B3, I1, I2, would be Cs in that particular area. And then in the next category, dispensaries, I would be looking at B2, B3, both business districts as conditional use. And then if we go down to processors, similar argument to what we had in this first category, I1 and I2, again, processors being similar to what's prohibited now as greenhouses and nurseries. It seems to me that because of the adverse impact, and particularly, I mean, all you have to do is a little research on these facilities. You're going to see that the hardest part of doing this work from the industrial side, it's not the security, it's the smell. You know, and this happens, just pick one of the cities where they're at. I'm not saying that they all are this way, but there is a lot of research and literature that makes that case pretty clear. I1, I2, as far as processors, I would argue should be a conditional use. And for processors, a B3 business district, while secure, I'm looking at the impact to a community, residential neighborhoods, or other, again, the smell. I'm trying to control the odor, the other parts of this business. So that would mirror basically what I said for cultivators. So B3 through I2 would all be conditional. The processing side, for a similar argument about containing the adverse effects, I would argue that should be conditional. And then my only other recommendation would be B2, B3 should be conditional for dispensaries. Again, the case I'm trying to make is that it does not put us in conflict in some way with arguing about whether the voters wanted it or didn't. Doesn't say to council that we're trying to impose some rule that doesn't exist on them. It's simply saying that while we have an industry, that industry should be competitive, and that industry also should come with some level of review. I would say to anyone, if they think my statements are being overly broad, pull code. You know, I've worked on this for a long time. I've probably spent at least 4 or 5 months going through categorizing codes on my own to try to get prepared actually to look at this table tonight. The one thing that I've seen is that, you know, again, I think this is a very, very broad, it's one of the broader, if not one of the broadest in the state if we accepted it at face value. So I'm only trying to impose some level of conditional use. That would be my recommendation. And again, not trying to interfere with the will of council whatsoever. It's just simply that this gives the Middletown community and our residents the ability to have some voice into these particular decisions. Otherwise, there is no review unless there's a variance of some sort for area size setback. But any of the other types of questions that may come up for any potential adverse impact, we've entirely waived that ability. So.
Do we, as staff, done any metrics comparing us to like situated cities as far as what they have for permitted uses versus conditional use?
That's a great question. I know that staff has been, especially James, was very involved with this. Obviously, he's no longer with the city. But I don't know all the details of that. I know, again, that I have seen what I call the Swiss cheese chart, which is very not official, but I don't even have it with me. It'd be helpful if I had it. But again, I think that council has seen it. I know it's been at a couple council meetings. I've seen it there. And that, again, I think takes this table with the limitations or restrictions of state law and kind of maps out where it is, where they can be permitted in the city.
Well, you know, even with that map, it still wouldn't change the fundamental argument here.
That's right.
Yeah, it wouldn't change.
And it gets to your point, Brian, of like, I can see a map where it is, but it doesn't pinpoint where, and there's, so the real problem, I probably should not say this on the record, right? But the real problem is that, issue 2 was passed in the fall. The General Assembly was like, hey, we're going to, change it to make it look like the medical marijuana program. And we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then the General Assembly hasn't done anything with it. And so they've introduced, the Senate introduced something last fall, the House introduced something, and they both were like, well, we're not going to pass yours. And they were quite different. The Senate version essentially stripped everything, and it was going to make it legal, but barely. And so, the General Assembly hasn't acted. They have, I've heard some new introductions either have come recently or will be coming that will modify the program in some ways. It doesn't, again, get to what you're getting at, but my guess is that since they've already issued, again, some 100 and some odd of these dual use, and Brian, I know that Monroe and I know that Lebanon have or either are considering adult use prohibitions. There's actually a provision, though, in the state law that says if you have a medical marijuana license and your city jurisdiction says you can't have adult use, then you can put it on the ballot. You need 50 signatures or something to put it on the ballot, and then the city votes for that specific. So my guess is that Monroe will have 4 of these dual-use facilities, but I understand. I'm not here to advocate one way or the other. City Council will consider your recommendation and approve it or not. I think, what you guys are having a very thoughtful conversation. It makes sense. And so certainly can do, and I'm sorry I don't have more information for you, Brian. I wish I had the map. I don't. And no, specifically, I was told this would be straightforward.
Something this important, there should be more information provided to us. This chart, I don't even know, these strike-throughs. Are we supposed to read the
Yep.
things as
Handwritten. Yep, that's right. So if in the staff report, and my guess is what happened is the staff report that you all received that was uploaded into the drive is the more current version, I believe. And I only say that because the staff report does not have those strike-throughs. It has the X's. So that's the only reason that makes me believe that is the more current, up-to-date version. So the slides may have been put together. I know that this has been intending to be on the agenda for a couple of meetings now, and we just haven't been able to have.
We received both of those.
I think what the earlier version was the non-handler.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got one with the X's and one with the cross outs. What kind of conditions would we want on there if we're going to have a condition? I mean,
What I looked at.
I was just surprised that we didn't have some conditions in order to limit the number as the city wanted to do.
And that's because that's not a zoning question. That's a separate statutory authorization.
Except we're looking at a zoning table.
Oh, I understand.
Roger, I was going to say that I'm not necessarily imposing any additional conditions. I'm just using it as a conditional use approval. So if you look at the current code, like one of the criteria here, you would look at, some of these are very similar to other instances, but 2 of them that I would point out here is, again, looking at the essential character of the neighborhood, general vicinity. That's a kind of general question you'll see across the uses, but if you look here, it talks about general welfare and excessive production fumes or odors, and I looked at, really spent some time kind of going through some of the language to make certain that this would be, have some legs. But when we're looking at a conditional use, looking at planning literature and also just looking at the way it's usually implemented, the adverse impact lends itself closer to this particular use, having a conditional use. The big thing is, as opposed to just by right having staff review and approve, it would come through Planning Commission, and we would either approve or not. Council still maintains final say, but at least we would hear from others in the community. We'd ask questions. We talk, and conditional use would allow us to narrow in, particularly on the size, the scope, the scale, vicinity, those sorts of things.
Would it make sense for us to approve the text amendment with a suggestion that the council consider conditional use?
I would recommend that we give them something detailed, because I think that my read on council is that they're going to want to move as quickly as possible. I'm not sure how amenable or open they are to whatever we propose at this point. I think if, at minimum, I think that we should give them some recommendation. And obviously, they'll have the final say, but if I'm hearing you correctly, I would, you know, again, that's where I'm trying to give specific instances of where I would say we can take testing off. We're not able to put any limitations there by law, so it kind of narrows us in these 3 areas. What would give us some level of review? And that's why I kind of focused on the first one, looking at B3 through I2, conditional, dispensaries, B2, B3, general business districts as conditional, and then processors, it just mirrors kind of that, it mirrors the cultivators. Cultivators and process being very similar, so B3 through I2, conditional, and then that's it. That's really,
Well, I mean, I think this topic has legs, and I think that if we make it too complicated, you know, they're just going to just move ahead. And I think if we want some conditions in there, we make them somewhat simple and easy to swallow.
well, if we, well,
I mean, my only
issue is
my only reason to bring it up in the first place was
we can't,
was the city going to be able to control the number of the way the table is?
Roger, the only thing there is that we're not able, I mean, you could do permitted with standards, but I don't know what standards we would place on them. You know, it's like you can't have a by right permitted use and then impose a whole string of standards to that, or a whole string of other conditions to that. So it's either permitted or it has to fall into the use approval. So
Well, I mean, one of the conditions could be going back to city council, couldn't it? For additional approval?
Yeah, so I think we're talking maybe about a couple of different things here. So, you know, you think of maybe like I think, Roger, if I'm understanding you correctly, and if I'm not, please let me know. You're thinking of the conditions of, okay, let's make the building look like this and use this type of brick, or, okay.
Nothing physical. There was nothing on the way the building looks. I don't care about that particularly.
Okay, so I guess then,
I just want to make sure that the city can control the number of dispensaries that's going to be there.
that's already done.
that's already done, yeah.
Well, it's not done by this table.
No, it's not done through zoning.
It's done
It's
by
done through a
ordinance.
separate ordinance by council that, again, they've either already voted on or will be voting on soon.
I think that's the thing, if I can interject here.
Sure.
Because I'm sitting here and I'm not new to the community. I once upon a time sat on planning commission for 2 terms, but a long time ago. I'm not hearing that the state has completed their work yet. So I guess my question would be, how are we here when not even the state is?
Well, the state has, they've issued licenses, right? There are medical marijuana dispensaries and there are adult use licenses that have been issued. They're not yet open, but they're nearing towards that. So there is a state program. My comment about the General Assembly failing to act in the fall is really just based upon their own statements. They introduced bills to essentially align the adult use, the recreational, and the medical. It's a state law, so in theory, the General Assembly could, you know, amend it at any time, and we would deal with it like we do any other amendment to the law. I can tell you, I would be, you know, the structure that we're talking about, which at least from what I'm hearing from you, sounds important. It's like a cap on the number, and not just having them on every street corner, like, you know, the vape shops or the, you know, whatever it is.
I claim to understand that,
Yeah.
the number thing.
Sure.
Council's taking care of that.
Yep, that's right. And the state will not. That is not something the state. That's in the medical marijuana, you know, statute or the program that the state implemented, and that's not going to change. And they're not going to take that authority away from local jurisdictions.
Can you
So
tell me that what we're looking at in these charts is found anywhere in anything that the state has done so far?
So the state wouldn't necessarily, you know, dictate to a local government, it's a permitted use in this district and not in this district. That's the purview of you all in the city council. And so that is why it, not all places that have medical marijuana or adult use cannabis users or operators, dispensaries, cultures, have it in their zoning code at all. Some, like I said earlier, some might consider it just retail. It's a store you walk in and buy something. Some might consider it a pharmacy. I think it's a little harder with the recreational, but as a medical marijuana, you had to have a prescription card. I think it was pretty easy to get, but like you could just go in and you're getting similar to, I don't know, it's being a little facetious, but some viewed it as pharmacies. So some communities don't regulate them at all in the sense of specifically calling out medical marijuana, these uses, adult use cannabis, these uses. They would just treat it like a retail store or something like that. So I'm not avoiding the answer to your question. I think that...
I'm not trying to make it hard.
No.
Let me help if I can. Where'd this come from?
This is
Where
just...
did this come from?
Yeah.
Did we invent this?
Yeah, that's right. The staff, I think city staff, I think, looked at, and I don't know everything they did, but my impression is that they looked at the map of where it's limited anyways, right? Because it can't be within a certain feet. I think it's 500 feet, which maybe isn't that far, but that's what state law says, 500 feet, of churches, playgrounds, parks. So that limits a decent chunk of the community already, right? So anywhere there's a school, you can't have it. And if it's a residential district, no one's going to say, oh, I can put it right in the middle of that house, because if it's an R1 or R2, that's retail isn't really going to be a permitted use in those anyways. So if you take that, just state law plus retail, that limits, let's say I'm making a number up, half of the city is out of it no matter what. So then I think the city staff looked at, okay, we've got these pockets, the Swiss cheese holes where they can't be. We've got a hot map that shows where it can be. What are those districts primarily where it can be, or where do we want them to be? And that's, I think, what resulted in this map. The chart. I figured out the difference in the handwritten and the non-handwritten. So one of them is for medical marijuana. One of them is for adult use. They're the same chart, but when it was printed, it looks like the medical marijuana had a couple extra, it needed some changes to reflect the adult use. So that's really, I misspoke. It wasn't an earlier version. It's the same version. It's just one shows it being, so that's, I think, why there's cross-outs. So if you look at this is the medical marijuana one, and I'm going to flip to the next page, which is the adult use. They're the same P's and X's, basically. So I think that's where this chart came from, was city staff looking at it and saying, okay, here's where they can be by state statute. What districts are those primarily in, and where would it be reasonably acceptable? There may have been more standards than that, but that is the impression I get from having talked with city staff about this. I wasn't in the weeds on looking at, what does Verity look like, and where can we have it on Verity, and okay, let's do that. So, but that's, I think, generally where that was the approach that they took and how they got to this. And Todd, I think everything you said makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm not saying good or bad, but I get where you're coming from, and and I want to make sure that I understood what you were saying as what you're proposing. I'm not saying everyone on council, but I just want to make sure. So what I understood, and this would be for both adult use and medical marijuana, I don't think you're distinguishing between the two. Correct. So for adult use cultivation, currently it is permitted in 5 districts: B3, I1, I2, BCO, and BCF. Principally permitted. Your recommendation or your discussion point was that B3, I1, and I2 would be conditional rather than principally permitted. Is that right? That's correct. Okay. For the dispensaries, currently permitted proposed to be permitted in 8 districts: O1, O2, B2, B3, BCI, BCH, BCO, and UCS. Your recommendation, or the discussion is in B2 and B3, it should be a conditional use. Correct. On the processor, It looks like it's 5 again, similar to the cultivation. B3, I1, I2, BCO, and BCF. Your discussion point was that B3, I1, and I2 should be conditional.
That's correct.
And then, again, like you said, the testing, it's research and development. We really can't restrict where that goes. So that's just by state law. So I wanted to, I guess, go back over what Todd said to see if there was an appetite amongst you all to make that your recommendation for the text amendment 1. And if that's something you guys would like to consider, vote on, discuss, recommend to council, however you guys want to do it, happy to. We had some specific talk, and I wanted to make sure I captured that correctly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we look at where we're at this point, there's already been discussion, council has already discussed. We've already passed 2 legislative items here for adult and rec, so we're just moving ourselves through the code at this point. And again, my understanding is that while the ordinance lays out, it will be dual use. I mean, that's where we're heading. So it's capped at 3, but there is no discussion about, the number of processors or cultivators. So again, in order for us to have some level of review, okay, as opposed to just by right permitted use, that would be my recommendation. I think, again, the important point I'm trying to make here is it's not trying to put us in some type of conflict or just be contrarian with city council. We're actually trying to impose some level of regulatory structure around what's being proposed. And again, we are not going to make a final say in this case. What we're saying is that among the numerous categories within these areas, it would give our community some level of review, gives the market some level of review. And again, it fits not only when we look at our code, some of what's being presented here doesn't necessarily mirror what we would see here as not being permitted. So I'm just trying to bring those pieces together. But again, looking at conditional use, it fits with this conditional use precisely because what it's looking at is, again, gives Planning Commission the ability to listen to the community, others who may feel that maybe they don't want those businesses there, And rather than us go through, I think it's important for our community to have some level of review on the types of businesses that are coming. And again, going back to conditional use, whether or not this has some adverse or detrimental impact, particularly when I'm thinking about the cultivation and processing side. Because whether you're looking East Coast or West Coast or anywhere in between, in the literature, that's one of the hardest parts of this business. Not saying that all of these businesses are going to have that particular problem, but containing the smell and the odor, and we're talking, from my understanding, council is looking to have maximum under the law for these facilities and have many of them. So if that is the case, I think it's important that we'd have some level of review. That's really, guys, I couldn't say much more than that at this point. And again, this process would treat it no different than any other industrial process or any other business as well. I'm not trying to impose something here based on some discussion about whether or not it's a gateway drug or not. That's not my intention. What I'm trying to look at here is whether or not that we would be treating it any different than any other business that comes into town. I mean, we do that regardless in most cases. When there is some potential adverse impact, why would we not do it here? So, but again, council will have the final say. Even with conditional use, and we go through all the additional steps, council, at the end of the day, still maintains control. I'm just asking us to have some level of accountability, some regulatory or some structure around it that we can talk about prior to just doing it and having the rest of us accept that decision.
So if we're going to propose it the way you talked about, don't we owe the council the reasons? If you just say, we insist that it be this way, this way, and this way.
Well, again,
In other words, there has to be some kind of reasons we give to city council to do it in order for them to go along with it.
I mean, they have this record, and I think you laid it out very well, your concern.
yeah, I mean,
Do you
I
think they're
think you
gonna
did
listen
in
to that? Rick?
particular with the things that we have to look for to approve things. You pointed out 2 items. The aroma that you mentioned is definitely one of them.
But how's anybody gonna know the room is there until it's built?
Well, he's done research
Yeah.
about other facilities.
Did we have to approve the crematorium? Because that's my neighborhood, and we were told, oh, you're not even gonna know it's here. We 100% know it's there.
See, I feel like there needs to be more information, right? Like, how do we deal with liquor stores? Are they all permitted uses in these same areas? I think that's analogous.
I looked at microbreweries and some of those other things in this recommendation. That Brian, that was one of the things I tried to look at, was how closely it would mirror some of those decisions as well, particularly microbreweries. I will tell you, and I'm kind of asking my colleagues on this one to, really think about this question. If we're not going to give council some level, of recommendation, this may be the only time we get to make the case. Because I know that this is being asked to be expedited. Not going to get into all the reasons why, but, there's been multiple votes. I know that members are eager to move. The sentiment is there to move. If you've watched the hearings, you will know that very clearly. But I'm saying, I really want us to be able to leave with some level of recommendation tonight. I really am hoping that we can do that. Roger, I don't know if I could restate the things that I've said. Those are the reasons that go into this conditional use. I mean, I don't know if I could restate it any differently than I have. But the simplest way that I could say this is that a conditional use is a conditional use like any other conditional use. It treats it the same as any other industry. And, I've laid out a lot of reasons for why I think these areas need to be a conditional use. But the primary tool that we're using here is that we have, again, some level of review to potential adverse impacts. That is the very definition of conditional use. It's one of the criteria that you would use to evaluate this industry or any other industry that has some potential adverse impact on a community. So that's kind of why I'm leaning in this direction. But
And I would say too, Roger, Mr. Horn obviously serves as the council liaison to this. He's not here with us tonight, but the mayor is, and I can imagine that she's taking our, very particular personal notes for herself, and I am sure, I don't want to speak for her, but my guess is that when this comes up, the reasoning and the discussion that you all had tonight will be made known to the rest of council.
Was there not a survey put out?
There have been, I think, a couple of surveys put out. Council has that information. It has been given to them, I believe. If I remember correctly, one survey might have been last year and then one was this year. I believe it ended sometime in May, I think, for sure. I know that council has that information. It's been given to them. Yes.
Honestly, I really appreciate all the research and work you've done. That's obviously far beyond your obligation. That's the staff's job, is to put together all the research and do that. I agree with what you're saying about the cultivation and processing. That's manufacturing, right? It's light manufacturing, it's agriculture. It's nothing different than like a indoor tomato farm, right? And so my biggest concern is around the dispensaries. And if, my position would be that no dispensaries are Ps. They're either double X's or Cs. So I would change all the Ps to Cs. That would be my opinion on it, because it's a whole new, this hasn't been done before in Middletown. And so I think there should be an adequate level of community involvement and sunshine and approvals. That's just my opinion. Otherwise, I agree completely with what you said on the other changes.
What can we do for council? I know that it's a text amendments. We need to have our language comply with the state law, having the levy that passed, or the levy, the issue that passed, the entire state. That's something that we definitely should do.
Yeah, so I think I think the what you guys are doing here is even much more narrow than that. This isn't a we approve of marijuana use, or we don't, or we think it should be in the city or not. This is really just looking at if it's going to be here, where can it be?
This
And
is
so-
darn near turnkey.
I'm sorry?
This is darn near turnkey.
Well,
Here's what you can do, and here's where you can do it.
sure. So I think, you all have an obligation or a directive to provide a recommendation to council on this text amendment. So there's 6 of you here tonight, so we need 4 to agree on something in order for there to be a recommendation. I dealt with another. I'm sorry?
Does council have a view on this? Is this?
So I don't want to speak for council. If I were to guess, which is only a guess, and please do not repeat it as anything but a guess, is that they will probably, at least 3, will probably approve this as presented to you all.
As is,
As is.
as is.
It's a complete guess. I've not talked with him. Please don't hold it against
I
me.
understand.
That's my
Guessing.
read.
Yeah, that's why I've tried to narrow this to the best of my ability, as opposed to, I understand, Brian, your concern about dispensaries, but knowing, and I'll just say this on the record, we have 3 votes that are going to move towards this. So this may be the only chance on the record we're going to get to have some level of review, because I would anticipate it going in a different direction, even with the narrow recommendation I'm trying to impose here. We don't have to go this direction. You don't have to agree with it at all. But again, what I'm trying to do, I'm hoping, and I mean this, I'm hoping that we could find some reasonable way to work our way through this. Again, this particular approach does not impose anything other than having a hearing like we would for anything else. I would hope that council would understand that, because they would always have the final review. So if we go through this process the way we're doing it here, it would be no different than what we do in any other industry. It's going to go through this step, it's going to go through the council, and there we are. But again, all the other elements that lend itself to review are in a conditional use. And again, whether council accepts this or not, I don't know. But at least I'm trying in good faith to try to put something together that says we can possibly have our cake and eat it too, okay? But at the same time, I would not be able to vote tonight on what's presented, because I think that's just asking entirely too much. I mean, in comparison, if you look up and down, go do your research, there's no other way to view this than almost a complete, just ignoring your police powers entirely. I mean, you may as well just take them off the table at this point, So what I'm saying is that this allows us at this point to have some level of accountability. So, other than that, I think it's in balance. It allows us to have review. It allows other areas to move forward. And it focuses on particular areas that I think would be the highest risk or the higher impact areas. Some of these other things we could argue to the cows come home, and I don't think we get anywhere with it. But in this narrower scope, that's where not only the code itself, where it's in conflict, but again, having some level of review. That's.
Recommendation to council based.
Before we do motions, we're still in the middle of a public hearing.
I was going to say,
We're just deliberating.
I was actually just thinking we actually got
ready.
quite,
Yeah.
it was a simple question from Roger that led us to this. So thank you, Todd, for doing
Because
that.
one other thing that we have to do here is we've got, this is part 1 of this particular area. We also have to look at the definitions themselves. I mean, most of these definitions, I think it's 3796 if I'm correct, or it's 3780 here, but
It's different for
recreational.
yeah,
I think I maybe thinking
recreational and medical use.
Here, the definitions here, what you see as Exhibit B, I mean, these are straight Ohio Revised Code. My only question here was, and I was going to ask you, Brody, about this, since I know some communities that have dual use licensure, they have amended to, the state lays out the 500 feet rule. some communities would just make it 1,000 feet to, rather than going back. Is there good reasons to, I know some communities have done that, or should we just stick with the state code the way it is and call it a day?
I would say on balance, we typically try to mirror state law.
Okay.
Just because it gets complicated and confusing.
Yep.
But as a home rule charter city, well, actually, is it a general law? We might actually be prohibited from expanding. Typically, 500 is what we look at, just to mirror state law.
Okay, yep. And so what we have here, it's a language straight from the Ohio Revised Code. I mean, it's just, if I'm correct on that, Brody.
Yeah, the definitions, I think, even refer to.
Yep.
So, as Todd said, medical marijuana is 3796, and then the adult use is 3780. So if you want to spend hours reading the law, you can. But and I think even the medical marijuana has administrative code. There's an extensive administrative code. It may even refer to that. The General Assembly hasn't quite got there on the adult use, and that's, I think, where some of these nuances that may come, likely will come on the adult use will be modified. The other difference, again, does not really impact you guys at all. I've had one other place deal with this. The city is implementing a licensing scheme along with this, and there is a there is a tax on adult use of 10% that go to various places. As it's currently drafted, the host communities, the cities, get 3.6% of all of like net sales. So, or gross sales, sorry. So there is some sort of additional tax or fee on there that will bring, in theory, revenue to the city. Again, doesn't really impact you all, but just did want to tell you that for whatever it's worth.
So is this one compartmentalized vote that we can take now?
So
Yeah, I was going to
Or
say, I was going to ask, maybe we would vote on this
I
separately.
was kind of thinking that as well. So let's, if it's okay with you all,
Public hearing.
we'll continue the public hearing, and then we'll segregate out text amendment number 1 with the modification, and we'll go over it again, and then we'll do 2, 3, 4. So if you, Todd, want to basically separate it into almost 2 mini hearings,
Okay.
I would be probably okay with that. If you want to bring up the folks,
Yeah,
if
let's-
anyone wants to speak just on this issue,
Let's do that.
then we'll do a vote on text amendment 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Because what I want to say is, after we finish this subpart, I think we should see who here, I don't know, I feel bad for the people that clearly aren't here for these issues.
Yeah.
You can tell by the shirt. And I wonder if it might make
Part of their
sense
gig.
for
They've
us
done
to,
this before.
take care of all the other business so that people that aren't interested in this specific issue have the chance to leave. I don't know. I just feel bad for people that may not be here for this reason. And there's only 3 people, and
I think we're pretty close as far
right,
as.
maybe after this is done, we try to just be accommodating to the folks that are here, if that's I don't want to make things
Yeah,
any
no.
worse. If we have to stay in the order of the agenda, that's fine.
Your guys' world, we're just living in it.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate some of the other items.
hope
being
not.
As complicated as this, so I think we'll be okay. I knew this would be this would be the bigger lift tonight, but, okay, so this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of a text amendment for medical marijuana and definitions, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the proposed text changes, text amendments, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and can move to deliberation now. We've talked about this already, kind of on the record for what is the proposal at this point. In terms of the definitions, is there any questions there? And maybe we just do a motion just to accept that in one vote, Brody, or do you want to separate it?
Yeah, I'm fine. At least the impression I get is there's probably not any changes to Exhibit B. It's really going to be to Exhibit A on both the adult use and the medical marijuana. I'm happy to talk through that just to confirm one more time that we're all on the same page. So I think, Todd, if you're okay with it, I'll propose a motion
Yes.
to approve the Exhibit B as presented, which is the definitions, and then to modify the tables for Exhibit A, which is, would be 1204.08, Table 1204-3. There's going to be two modifications, one to the medical marijuana table and one to the adult use table. They will mirror each other, though, in their changes, and so those changes would be to change the adult use cannabis cultivation facility from permitted to conditional for B3, I1, and I2, to change the adult use cannabis dispensary from permitted to conditional in B2 and B3, and to change the adult use cannabis processor from permitted to conditional in districts B3, I1, and I2. So that would be your motion if someone is willing to make it.
Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Parsons, a second.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Duba. So we'll call the roll, Alicia.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith? Mr. Ambergy?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, this brings us to our second text amendment this evening, and this will look at 121002 to remove the plan developments to receive approval from the Architectural Review Board after the Planning Commission and City Council have approved the final development plan. So, Mr. Ruggie,
That was my staff report.
stole your thunder there.
So no, so I think right now PDs are reviewed by obviously both you all and then City Council, and then they also then have to go to the Architectural Review Board. It's just honestly a pretty odd process. And so this is just kind of streamlining the plan development use. It'll still be considered by you all with a recommendation to council, and then final approval by council. So it's just taking away the Architectural Review Board review.
The language in yellow is the new language.
Yeah, so that would essentially add that language in that it waives the requirement to go in front of the Architectural Review Board by taking out an approved development plan.
One reason for that is I'm on the Architectural Review Board.
Oh,
One
good.
reason for that is once it's been approved by Planning Commission and also goes to City Council, regardless of what you see on the Architectural Review Board, you have no power to change anything because all variances have been accepted. So it's silly to have it. So, I mean, I'd recommended to James that we, get rid of that requirement some time ago. So I'm all for that.
Great.
But I do need, we do need to understand that, the architectural standards on, pitch of the roof, breaks in the side of the house, what kind of materials are going to be, all this sort of thing are, kind of just written on plans, and you may not notice them improving them. So we need to be kind of cautious of that on the Planning Commission and look at that and make sure we know what variances we're actually giving. But I'm all for this.
Any other comments?
My only comment would be that makes perfect sense. I think staff ideally, because plans and specs, especially on a screen like this, the detail, I forget the terminology, but like the facade detail, all the little specs of materials and whatnot, it's very fine print, especially on a screen. And so I would I hope that the staff would point out by approving it, all the things that we would be approving that are variances.
And I think we should ask that question of staff, and make sure that they've done that review and
Yeah,
there
good
aren't
point. Yeah, help us remember.
Just the next person here, not me.
Right.
kidding.
We figured you don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. Smart, you're picking up on it. And just procedurally, obviously, I'm wondering if we should do 2, 3, and 4 together. Is that
Yep. we can do
people
that.
comfortable with that?
Yep.
So if you want to bring if we want to allow people to speak about them individually, but maybe a final vote.
Okay.
My guess is they're all here for the,
Probably so. Okay. Do you want us to go ahead and open the public hearing for 12-1002 at this point?
yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. I'd like to open the hearing for 1210 for architectural standards, 12-1002. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Okay. So any other comments before we move for a motion? I know sounds like a couple folks have already said that they would be in approval for this. Any other comments? Would you like to make a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I'm sorry. Daniel was, Mr. Daniel,
Yes.
Mr. Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Cash, Mr. Duba,
Yes.
Ms. Griffith, Mr. Ambergy.
Yes.
All right, thank you for letting me do something. So next,
I almost went there, but
no, I appreciate that. So next, before you all tonight is the text amendment number 3, which is changing, although you probably would have done a better job than me, changing chapter 1210.0, under 1210.03 and 02 to remove the section that dictates facade materials on a residential dwelling when visible from a public street. Again, you'll see in the yellow, the two changes. 1210.03 removes when such facades are visible from a public street, and then under 1210.03, again making it when such facades are visible from a public street. And this is awful. I have no idea why they wanted to do this. So, Roger.
It's basically the same. And some of the issues I guess you have are some of the planned developments have private streets,
Yep.
and so that picks up one of the things, and
That's right.
One of the issues we've had.
And I know especially with some of the school sites, as they've gotten, their private streets.
When you look at these two, I think that's taken care of in both of these.
That's right. So it keeps the standards consistent, even when it might be viewed from a private street versus a public street.
Right.
So this is increasing the standards, and rather than decreasing them.
But we have to choose one or the other. It's either one or the other.
It does say "or" there, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it says if you would, so the request says, the board wishes to change the code so that vinyl cannot be used on the first floor of any dwelling.
Yeah.
The First Amendment should be approved.
Yep, I see that.
They wish to change so that the vinyl cannot be used on any facade that is visible from any street. The Second Amendment should be
I
approved.
should have read this is where the PowerPoint's more detailed than the staff report.
I kind of like the first one because then we don't have to worry about the definition of street. Is an alley a street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're choosing the change to 1210.03
The top one.
to be 1. Oh wait, they're both.
Yeah, they're optional, yeah.
Door number 1.
Thank you.
Top one or the bottom one. because
Thank
they're
you.
not numbered, yeah.
I'm
That would be
not
my recommendation.
totally dumb all the time, but yes. So you guys would, I think that makes sense. So we're going to adopt. The motion would be to adopt the first change.
I'll make that motion to adopt the top one.
We got to do the public hearing. We'll come back to you, Brian. Don't worry.
we're coming back. Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed change for 121003, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to 121003, please come forward. Christo Holmes, would you like to come forward? I know this came up in one of our cases. I remember that, but
Just say no.
sure. Okay,
They're here. Might as well get the money.
I got to swear you in. Okay. So
Marijuana thing really primed me up, so.
your mind on that one, right? So okay. All right. Please state your name and address for the
Adam Christo, 7594 Tyler's Place Boulevard, Westchester, Ohio. It is. Again, we are in an affordability crisis. There's massive amount of regulation, already increasing costs, which is limiting home ownership and making, rentals prevalent. The more regulation, the more we add things like this, dictate it, is the more it raises costs, and that's that many more people who can't afford to have their own home. So just in a general statement, I understand why you applying it, but I think there should be in, still be areas where it should be looked at, especially in the entry level or the affordable house segment differently, as some of the projects we're proposing, because that is a significant cost increase. So that's all I have to say.
So are you speaking in opposition to this particular?
Yes, I'm speaking.
On the record, okay. Now, I remember that this came up in one of the, in our prior cases.
Yes.
And you worked with Planning Commission on this particular issue and the development, which we appreciate that very much. So your position then, when we look at this either-or question that we have, are you proposing here then that you would rather see some flexibility in terms of street? Because I know that I know that council has pointed out, and Mr. Horn as rep has pointed out that the idea would be to create a better structure, more rigorous requirements, increase the developments, improve the developments. Are you saying from a street? Would you be more in favor of that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, whatever faces the facades, the sides, whatever faces the street, like in our particular town boulevard, to have the sides of the end units be brick, all the front, facade yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly reasonable, especially when you're talking about, attached style development. That would not be a major issue, because you're only affecting, a limited amount of units while you're still giving the exterior appearance of the brick that you want from the street. So,
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. We can move to deliberations.
Point out that the variance can still be given against these standards.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to do something different, vinyl in more places, it can be done. And part of the reason that we're doing this is because of infill lots. We've had a number of people trying to do infill, and you got all public streets there, versus some non-dedicated streets. So anyway, that's.
Roger, are you making or suggesting, which one are you suggesting then, the first or the second?
I was suggesting the first one all along.
Okay.
Just pointing out that regardless of which one of those you do, you could still have variances issued against it.
Okay.
Which is fine.
You're saying you're not slamming the door in their face?
Yeah, no, you're not. You're not ruling out, what people would be wanting to do.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I just want to say I've lived in a house with just brick on the front and siding on 3 sides, and I personally probably would have been happier if that wasn't permitted, because it would have added a little to the cost of the home, but I think the costs outweigh the benefits outweigh the costs. So yeah, I'd make a motion to approve the language in the top proposal.
I would second that.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith? Yes. Mr. Ambergy?
Yes.
Okay, so next before you all is the fourth and final text amendment for tonight. This was a request from the city manager's office. It is to update and remove residential uses from the BC subdistricts, with the exception of the BCR subdistrict. So again, the map is super tiny up on the screen. You can see perhaps, it's better for you all, in the bottom kind of right section, looks like it's like down in here, were proposed modifications where residential was removed from most of the BC subdistricts.
Were they Ps and now they're double Xs?
You know, a very great question. I believe that is probably the case. I know especially, yeah, I believe that is the case. They were not conditional, I believe they were Ps. So this is, oh crap. This is to preserve some of the undeveloped land on the east side of I-75 to support employment-producing uses. The BCR was designed as a business residential district, so that's why we didn't want to update that. But any future residential use proposed in the BCI, BCH, BCO, or BCF would require review and approval by you all first, and then City Council as a planned development. So it's not, again, it would have to go through the rezone and the planned development phase to allow some sort of, probably multifamily primarily use in one of these business districts, but it would not, outlaw it. It wouldn't slam the door shut indefinitely, but it would not allow it to be a permitted use, and they would have to come for a rezone on a planned development. But again, this is, I think, primarily for out near 75 as the Renaissance Point and stuff around the hospital gets developed. So.
Any questions about the change?
Not for me.
This is, again, public hearing for Chapter 1204, point 3. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed change, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. We will close the public hearing, and we can move to deliberation and a motion. Any questions there?
I propose that we accept it as written.
I'll second that.
So Daniel and two of us.
I'll vote for it, but not without speaking to the fact that again and again and again, my God, now it's been, I don't know, 10, 12 years. I keep hearing, because I do listen to council meetings, they're on YouTube, and we lack a lot of single-family and residential units in the city. So I'm not going to dwell on it because I do see the point in this location, but I hope we remember this if this starts coming up in all areas of the city, because then you're going to find well, there's no land. How are we going to build residential? So I'm just asking you to keep that in mind.
We have that development where Roosevelt School was. I forget how many, 47, or something like that.
28, I think.
But anyway, there's a number of single-family houses going in where the Roosevelt School was.
I would assume that that whole area of North Breel is zoned residential. Does anyone know? I mean, there's a ton of acreage north of Manchester, I think it is.
Can I share a little story with you? These guys could probably tell you, the developers can tell you that there's no water or sewer available up there. And I remember, again, going back in time, I even inquired with City of Franklin to see if we could hook onto their sewer. And that wasn't available, and they ended up actually privatizing that. But that, I think, is the answer to your question. You know,
So there's a school there. How was the school on like a pocket septic? Or?
I promise, and you won't take offense, but I won't say anything about what our school board votes on.
I'm just wondering how they have, if there's no sewer or water, how there's a school. I mean, there's got to be.
Yeah, we'll have to follow up on that discussion later.
Yeah, I didn't mean
no,
to take
no,
us,
no, no.
but I just want us all to remember it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm gonna try to, let's move through this motion. And we will get you an answer on that too, Brian. I share a couple things with you, but
We were in the middle of the vote.
yes, we have a motion and a second, correct? So we just need a vote. Let's go ahead and take that vote now.
Yes. Mr. Daniel?
Again, yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith? Yes. Mr. Ambergy?
Yes.
And this is now this is our preliminary development plan. Brody, I will let you take this one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So our final public hearing tonight is a preliminary development plan and zone change for the Maple Ridge multifamily development subdivision. It was submitted, the applicant is JA Development out of Westchester, the engineer is Bayer Becker. It's for parcel IDs 5200001, 5201005, and 5200954. This is along Town Boulevard, and so the planned proposal is for 140 single-family attached residential homes with private streets, public water, sanitary, and storm sewers. But there's also proposed plans for a few pocket parks along the within the development. So the property is currently zoned B2 Community Business District. The purpose of this is a wide variety of commercial and office uses that are in close proximity to residential neighborhoods. It is there kind of on what I would call the east and northeast side there of Town Boulevard. Here is the preliminary plan for the property. You can see there's a couple of detention ponds on site, and then these largely attached single-family homes with some facing Town Boulevard, but many on private streets behind. And I believe around the ponds are these pocket parks kind of right off the primary entrances there off Town Boulevard. The future land use plan from 2022 is again a regional mixed use district, which is primarily commercial uses that cater to the I-75 traffic in the regional markets, with secondary uses that include office, medical, service, and residential. Site development standards shall not show that there shall not be more than one principal building on an individual lot, except as approved as part of a planned development. In this case, in the cases of a planned development or a condo project, the entire group as a unit shall be subject to the minimum setbacks for the applicable zoning district, and also the yard requirements and setbacks as if it was an individual lot, even though in this case I think it's pods of kind of 4 to 6. Here's all the various setbacks, requirements, and side yard setbacks. Here is some of the proposed renderings of what the buildings will look like. Obviously some different facades on there that I'm sure the applicant will be able to talk about. So this, again, would propose, this plan, the PD plan proposes 140 attached single-family homes. The purpose of the PD district is to provide an opportunity for creative and flexible land development when the base zoning district, like here, will not accommodate the proposed development, but where it will further the purpose of both the development code, the city's comp plan, and the goals and policies of the city's plan. So the project, again, will need ultimate approval by city council as part of the map amendment and the zone change. There are various architectural standards that they still have to go through still. It has not yet been passed by council to no longer have to go to the architectural review board. So they are requesting a waiver of certain standards found in section 1210.032 of the development code, that the main entrance of any residential building shall be oriented towards a public street. And then for the corner lots in residential zoning districts, a dwelling unit may be oriented towards the intersection of two streets. For building materials, the first above ground story of a residential dwelling shall have facades constructed of stone, brick, wood, stucco, cultured stone, cement siding, or hardy plank when they are visible from a public street. Again, even though we just changed that, it is not something that has yet been changed or recommended to be changed. Has not yet been changed by City Council. And then for roofs and projections, a minimum overhang of 12 inches shall be provided over all faces of the exterior walls of the dwelling. The material of such projection shall be constructed of durable and maintenance-free materials. In the exterior areas of chimneys used for masonry, wood burning, open flame fireplaces shall be constructed of the exterior materials provided for in the section. The applicant is requesting a waiver of the following sections as well. No horizontal plane on ground floor street facing building frontages shall continue over 24 foot in length without being broken into different planes. Any side walls exceeding 30 feet in length shall be broken into different planes or be substantially broken down with doors, windows, or a variety of siding materials. Street-facing garages shall not comprise more than 50% of the ground floor. Building frontages, any garage with more than 2-car parking capacity should not directly face onto any street. It is recommended that any garage with more than 2-car parking capacity should have the sidewall facing onto the street. And for all new subdivisions, the applicant shall provide sufficient information to demonstrate a variety of base architectural styles or models dependent on the size of the subdivision in accordance with Table 1210-1. And because this is more than 100, it would be 8 plus 0.08 times the number of lots over 100. So that's, roughly 5, so 13. No, wait. I did my math wrong. Basically 8. I guess we're rounding to the nearest whole number would still make us at 8. So the site landscaping on the site allows that this requires that the standards of the landscaping be subject to 1216.02 unless otherwise modified through the PD review. When it is subject to this, the applicant must submit a landscaping plan that is submitted with the certificate of zoning. And for 3-family dwellings, that requires a minimum of 3 trees shall be provided in each front yard area, up to 2, which may be planted between the sidewalk and the street curb. And each tree shall be a minimum of 1.5 inch. The city's development committee reviewed the proposal. The engineering department likewise said that it has to comply with engineering manual and building code. Here are the review criteria. And then the staff recommendation is staff recommends a decision on this application to be based on the future land use map of the comp plan.
What does that mean?
Not much of a recommendation.
Basically, it's saying, does it support the?
Yeah, so it basically says look at the comp plan to determine whether or
Definition
not.
page that goes with this one?
Yeah.
So that was the map you showed earlier.
Yeah, I'm going back to it.
Brown.
Yeah, so I think here it's regional mixed use, which primarily is a commercial district with secondary uses of office, medical, service, and residential to support essentially that I-75 corridor.
Is this in one of the BC districts?
I believe it is right now. It's B2.
Oh, it's not one of the BC.
No, it's not a BC. It's a B2. Yeah. So, and there's, again, the site, the preliminary.
And the one to the left that says proposed Havenwood, is that the one we approved earlier this year?
Believe that to be the case, yes. I think I might have been here for that one.
I think you were, and I think these gentlemen spoke. I think that's a development you all are working on.
Havenwood?
It's in yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Like in May or something, yeah.
April or May, yeah.
So, any other questions for me? I probably won't know the answer, but I'll try. And obviously the applicant is here and I assume will speak when given the opportunity.
This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed preliminary development plan, please come forward.
Alex Betts with Bear Becker, 1404 Race Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45202. Yes. So my applicant would like to propose a marijuana dispensary. No, I'm just kidding.
As long as you don't inhale.
Yeah. Thanks, Brody, for pinch hitting today. It's very helpful, and obviously to staff for assembling this slide deck. Has all the nuts and bolts of the proposal. There are a few other items I did want to touch on in an effort not to be too repetitive here. With the comprehensive plan, we just wanted to mention, residential is an allowable use as a secondary use here. And if you look at the development contextually, the commercial use is to the north. Everything to the west of this, you see Nicholas Place, Havenwood, Heritage Landing, are all attached or multifamily residential uses, and then everything to the south is single-family residential. And so I think townhouses serve as a nice transitional zone between the commercial uses to the north and then the single-family uses to the south. The applicant did work with staff on this, particularly Nathan and others. Originally, they came in and proposed one product type across the site, one townhouse product type across the site. And they worked together to, it was an idea of staff to show a rear-loaded product type, meaning the garages are in the back of the units, so that the front porches and front facades would face towards Town Boulevard with no garage. And so the applicant worked with staff on that and agreed to it, and so you see the dark orange 12 units along Town Boulevard. Those are the rear-loaded garages, so the garages are in the back. The facade would look like this, facing towards Town Boulevard. And then there's 3 different product types now instead of 1, so you get 3, instead of just changing material and changing colors on the facade, you get 3 distinct and unique elevations across the development, each with its own character. The other thing we wanted to do is, as Brody mentioned, put the pocket parks up close to Town Boulevard, again for that aesthetic along the road. So when you're driving along Town Boulevard or walking along Town Boulevard, you don't see the backs of units. You see the fronts of those dark orange units, and then you see the pocket parks in the open space. And so that's definitely something we wanted to emphasize in this development. I think that's everything I had to add to the development. If you have any specific questions about the site layout, happy to answer them. Adam Christo is also here with me. He'd be able to answer your questions, particularly as it relates to architecture and things like that. So thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposed development, please come forward. I actually did have a question for you. You took off too fast on me. I'm sorry about that. It's really about the waivers that you're asking for.
I gotta do this over and over? All right. Right hand. Right. 7594 Tyler's Place Boulevard, Westchester, Ohio. Yes, it is.
Yeah, so the waivers. One of the issues here that there's so many details in here. I feel like what you're asking right now, I can't see the forest for the trees here. Many of the things here that you're asking, I feel like that we could address this in a final development plan and kind of work out those details as you moved it forward. Are you asking for this tonight, the waivers tonight, as far as the preliminary development plan? Because if we had consensus that we at least would move this forward to council, let them work through some details on that, I feel like we could address a lot of these details in that final development stage. It's just I feel like it's going to be hard for us to go through all of what you're asking right here. At least I'm kind of struggling with having some clarity of it. I haven't had enough time to really look at this in the level of detail that I want before I would vote on this section for architectural standards. And I think there's really, overall, I like the facades that you've put there, put some variation in the development itself. And the product types, I think that's an improvement as opposed to the number of units that you're proposing here. But this part right here, I feel like I'm getting kind of lost in the detail on this particular section. I would rather look at that in another round. But
Well, I mean, okay, couple points here. This is the same or similar exactly what we requested on Havenwood. What happened in Havenwood, which was makes things complex, is you get a preliminary approval and you see the plan and you see the elevations and everything is good. Then you find out after you spend all this time and energy going to final plan PD, your plan isn't allowed and doesn't work because of all these stipulations, like garage width can't be more than 50% of the plan, all these different things. So it makes it a little complex moving forward and spending a lot of money when basically, you know, you like the plan, you see it, but there's all these code regulations that says you can't build it. So it's a little bit of a strange situation. On a lot of these, we're requesting variances. I mean, we put the whole thing, but really it's just specific segments of each. And this is the same request to a T that we had on Havenwood to build the same product. So you see the elevations, you see the product in front of you. That is what exactly is being proposed, and to be able to build those products as shown, we would need these variances.
Any other questions for Mr. Christo?
Yeah, I have one. Sure. There's still the battle over the old overhang. That's been going on forever, hasn't it?
I don't know if it's been a battle, but yeah, maybe it has. 'Cause I know other developers, Fisher and some others, have had some back and forth on that. I mean, it's just, again, these are one of these additional cost items that you generally don't get much appreciation for. And again, in this environment, you know, trying to keep mortgage payments down with interest rates and keep affordability, you know, we try to put a lot of money in the right part of the elevation to give the bang, and some of these things that really don't enhance the overall look that much for the cost, we try to back off. So we try to put stone on the front. You know, we did the rear garages, you know, a lot of bang for your buck there, where the overhangs just for the expense really don't get you that.
Forgive me for taking everybody's time, but I want you to teach me something.
Sure.
The 12-inch overhang, isn't that what impact it has versus what do you use? 14? Is this what they're asking for? I don't even remember. A 14-inch overhang?
I think 12 inches.
I mean, what are they asking for?
You all are asking for less than 12. You
Oh,
want
just,
less overhang.
yeah, well, I mean,
Because
because
it weighs
this has it mostly, it's all the way around.
I'm really time dating myself.
Yes.
But I was thinking of it relative to the actual pitch of the roof.
No, this is the we'll call it,
It's the eaves, right?
yeah, the eaves or the
Okay.
soffit, you know, and so
Okay.
forth, ventilation. And usually, you know, we do, I can't forget the exact dimension. On the fronts, you do an overhang, but then when you require it on the sides and rears, that's where it becomes more costly and complex. But it doesn't affect, this is not the pitch of the roof.
You want relief from a 12-inch overhang.
Around all sides, yes. Because you see on our elevations, we do have overhangs on the front gables. That's no issue. It's just when you go see down the sides, because as written, you would have to go on the backs, and any ones where there isn't a gable. I mean,
Thank you.
Sure.
You did educate me.
all right. I'm glad I
Go
could.
back a picture or two. I just want to point something out here. Part of our standards, which I think we need to get some staff to review, you know, with some of the builders to see what really works these days, is that the garages can't be more than 50% of the width of the building. And, you know, from what I've seen, we haven't had any that were hardly less than that. So, you know, most of these, except for the rear entrance, which I do think look better, but you know, I mean, that's one of the standards they're asking for. And we don't give them now. How do they come up with their final drawings and plans?
Yeah, it doesn't, like, a lot of these.
They don't know what to draw.
I see your
We
point on
found
that.
last time, we got a preliminary approval, and then they're like, well, you can't, you're approved, but these, but you can't build it. So it was really.
But I think maybe our standards, to be honest with you, there aren't standards anymore. We've given so many variances to them.
The issue you have in your zoning code, and I highly recommend you come up with, you can't put townhomes in the single-family architectural designation. That doesn't apply. Even, we ran into this on the Lincoln School site. There's so many things that don't apply. It's incredible. You need to have a special carve-out for single-family townhomes, and they're to a different set of rules. That way you wouldn't have to go through this
Agree.
That makes a lot of sense.
entire, yeah, because on Lincoln School site, we found, unless we did a PUD, we were forced to do apartments there. Like, we want to do single family, but based on the zoning, we weren't allowed to do individual separate lots. So it was like forcing us into multifamily. I'm like, and they don't want multifamily. It was just, some of the crazy things, the way the code's written, so.
Any other questions?
Just a question on your pocket parks. Public going to be able to access those?
I mean, would not recommend that. I mean, just for the marketability, because it's something.
Is somebody reasonably close, want to walk on the walking trails, or?
Yeah, I mean, on some of that, but what you happen is an element you can't control. And, you get a public element in there, and, you don't know what you're going to get, and then next thing you know, you've got a marketability problem, and it would be a scary, thing. Then you're trying to enforce rules, and they're not really big enough to handle any sort of volume of public. They're designed to handle the volume from that community, so.
Of course, you're asking for public subsidy of the park.
How am I asking for public subsidy?
I thought you were.
No,
That was another one.
that was on.
Another one?
Yeah, that's a different one.
Yeah, that was on.
It's you though, right?
Yeah, well, it isn't a subsidy.
Okay.
You imposed
I
a
understand.
costly regulation.
No,
I'm
I
looking for
understand.
relief on this. You turned that around on me. I like that.
It's not really a question, but the comment is, the reason we proposed making the change to the code about facades being, first floor facades being brick, hardy board, et cetera, was because of the last project right across the street from this. So that's the only waiver that I am wavering on providing at this point, would be the one about, I just think it would be so much nicer for the long-term value of these units and of the community if all the way around the first floor had to be brick, stone, hardy board, et cetera, as opposed to vinyl siding.
As we brought up before, we don't have an issue of anything you can see from the street, making the sides all first floor brick, for the aesthetics. Now, I mean, for the homeowner, the maintenance, I mean, it gives no inherent value to the owner. I mean, it really, really doesn't. I mean, you could look at the market
purely
studies.
aesthetics.
It's just, purely aesthetics. I mean, good vinyl. I think vinyl's gotten a bad reputation because people use, 0.36 mil and, let all kind of stuff grow on it. Now, using a point, and that's some other things you should consider, requiring a better millage. Now it's the most maintenance-free thing you can have. You can hose it off, you can clean it, doesn't get the calcification you have, they get on brick. Brick leaks, it's a problem. Probably one of our biggest warranty issues is, brick tends to be like, vinyl would never have any, any leak problem, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposed preliminary development plan? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the plan, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. Okay. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing, and we can move to deliberations. Did staff made a recommendation, I think, that we look at the comprehensive plan. Maybe we go back and pull the chart one more time. I think in the recommendation, if we'd like to give two things. One, whether or not we think that it's within the current comprehensive plan, and then also, I think, Brian, you brought up the waivers itself, if you want to put that into a motion itself. So,
What's a secondary use in the regional mixed use, right? Residential is.
If you look around it too, it fits in with, there's two other residential right there.
Yeah, I thought it was a fair point that it's a good transition from single family, the older single family neighborhoods to the south, and the apartments and retail to the north. I mean, it seems to me like it's a good fit for the area.
Do we want to address the waivers at all? Did anyone want to bring those up? I know that there was some discussion about at least the facades, or do we want, how do we want to handle those waivers? That's the question, so.
I think the specific waivers he's asking for here, I think are fine, personally. Now, if there's some waivers on roof pitch and things like that that we don't see on here, you know, maybe we need to kind of address those, but from what I see, I don't see any problem with waivers. Are there ones we ought to be concerned about? Right. Yeah, but you try to look at those elevations on a telephone.
My only one was, I just think it's nicer, especially with attached, if you could have brick or something different than vinyl siding on the first floor facades. I mean, it's the reason we proposed the city council to change the code. But I'm not, you know, if no one else agrees with me, I'm comfortable proceeding with the waivers.
So Brian, you're saying that you would not be in favor of waiving that particular?
B1, yeah.
I would agree with you with that. Otherwise, Roger, you could make a motion to, if you are in agreement with Brian on this, that we could exclude B and make the motion carry these two other items.
Well, or make B the way we've already approved the variance. That was put the period after.
Visible,
Yeah, after visible.
which would mean all first floor. I mean, they're
Would
all.
that cause any problems for you guys? In other words,
So I actually think the period is after plank. It removes when such facades are visible. So it basically makes a requirement that there can be no vinyl on the entire first above ground story on all sides, regardless of whether it's visible or not from the street.
I mean, we're making that change for, if it's accepted by council.
Can I have you come up? Sorry.
So when this, Adam Christo, so when this came up, there was an indication on, like projects like Havenwood, as it was done there, we agreed to make the first floor facade all brick. And this is sort of an extension of our Havenwood product. And on those particular products, you know, the brick requirement, this would be a perfect time for a variance from the full brick wrap. And I mean, we're workable definitely to do an additional brick, like I said, on anything that's visible, or even some legs, but just, you know, really putting on that whole back and first level. I mean, it adds
If you go back to the site plan, I feel like almost every facade is visible from other than the part that faces, or that abuts I-75, the sides and the rear are going to be visible from one of those streets, right? I mean, just because it's all
But those are
oriented.
private streets.
I agree, but we're not,
Yeah.
private streets is not our criteria under the new change.
Right, but the change isn't effective until city council.
Yeah.
I agree. I
Got
know
in
it's
under the
not
gun.
approved yet, but what I'm saying is, the only facades that I would be comfortable saying, fine, it can be vinyl siding all the way up, would be the ones that abut I-75, because no one's gonna see those, and maybe the ones that abut, you know, the property to the north where the Hampton Inn is.
Well, so if you understand the gradient and the landscaping and where the orange units are, of course, those are all gonna be, those are all gonna have to be stone, and then I would propose those sides, all the orange, of course, are already front, first floor, the sides would be stone, and then all these end units, starting with the light orange, and then the yellow on those sides, those are really all the ones you're gonna be able to see from the street, because especially the grade goes up, quite a bit, so the rest of it, that's why we worked with Nathan on the front door. He said, if you do this and we could have had all garage fronts, and we said, if you really make this the centerpiece and you do the pocket park and you give this buffer distance, I think this would work. So that's why we would see that being I think a reasonable middle ground. We've already sort of went above and beyond on those front units. So I keep pleading the case of affordability. It is an issue. So I really want you to take that in consideration.
In this case, what you're saying, though, is rather than wrap the entire, you're just saying if it is facing a street, you're going to, it's kind of like in the prior case, you're going to put brick, at least half brick wrap or brick wrap on that front. Is that?
Yeah, we'd be fine doing on the sides that you'll be able to see on the first units, and then on the sides of the orange, we go. I have no problem going all the way up. Brick legs, if we're doing, might as well go all the way up. That way, the view from the street primarily will be, all first floor brick sides. As far as anyone can see, it'll be brick, because those orange units block the view from that. You got the grade and you got the pocket park, so the really only.
Would anyone mind if I stand and point? Because
You need a laser.
I know, I wish I did. I know this area fairly well. I feel like the backs of those 12 units that are in front of the pond, you'll be able to see that.
That's right there.
Yes, the backs of all those, you'd be able to see driving out.
Actually, that makes sense. Probably with the grade, you still would be able to.
The change we were talking about was visible from any street as opposed to only a public street.
Well, actually, we were just saying visible, period.
Right, okay, but in the interior
Any
streets,
facade.
I mean,
No, it was any facade.
right.
First floor.
still needs to be approved by council though, right?
I agree. I'm just saying, that's what we all agree should be the standard.
But until it
It
feels
just has-
unfair to already start applying that.
But these variances have to be approved by council.
They're expecting our vote now, is my only point, right? Like, I hear what you're saying, but it's not like it's already been approved and we're backing up. That would be wrong, I agree. And they're here for our approval today, and at the same meeting today, we all agreed unanimously that the first floor of all facades, whether it faces a street or not, should be brick, hardy board, stone, etc. So I just feel like it would be so much nicer. And a lot of these rears, I mean, those are really nice green spaces, and I think they would be so much nicer for the residents if it's not just giant walls of vinyl siding, that even the new stuff can get wavy. Even the new stuff, it's just not as nice looking, especially for a multi-unit development like this.
Yeah,
If you look at,
these are good looking units.
yeah, well, they are from the front. And I think it could be a really nice thing. But if you look at these types of developments in Mason or Lebanon or Westchester, they are brick or stone or hardy board all the way around, at least on the first floor.
Well, again, we're speaking to price points. I mean, if I can get, Mason and those, it's a whole different story. So well,
These are still going to be way cheaper than Mason, right? Because
Well, yeah, but there's factors. I mean, we're going in this particular area, and we've identified, a particular price point. And I mean, with land and infrastructure costs, it's just getting, very difficult. As far as the brick, I mean, if there is certain areas that you're very particular to, I mean, I'm still open to taking a look at it. I just, putting this surrounding, I mean, it is, if you add you know, the net cost of wrapping all those across. And again, we spent, if you look at our elevations, and I know you've seen other builders come in, you know, we try to spend money on the fronts, and these are not going to be absent of multiple windows on the side and on the rear. So that's really where we try to get our bang for the buck. If I wanted to reverse this, I would come in, you know, with less gingerbread and cost on the front, and then we could allocate that around the side. So what we try to do is give you really nice looking elevations up front and have some offset on like this on
Giving you fewer trees.
Huh?
We're giving you fewer trees.
Well, I was supposed to fit 3 in front of every unit on the current code, so I'd like to see that happen.
Are the trees in the backyards in those center areas, are those part of the plan? Or those aren't just like pretty pictures? Is that something you'll plant?
No,
Assume not.
we will come up with the final PD, a final landscape plan. So what we said on the front trees, we would, because of the spacing, that's what we
Right.
make
I
sense.
understand on the front.
The rest, we would have to, you know, we have to present when our final PD, a landscape plan, and that's where we could discuss what kind of trees we want to put, and that's where we could get more input, maybe on putting some more greenery and offset on those homes from the back, so. By the way, I have an LOA from a marijuana dispensary right on that corner. No, I'm not kidding you. And I brought it to my brother, and he said, "Are you kidding me? Hell no!" So we turned him down. Just so you
There was something in the paper where somebody had a site already picked out on, say Dayton Road.
know. I don't know. They got an LOI, and yeah, right on that little piece across from the pond. I'm like, that wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Well, thank you. I totally understand your point about bang for the buck and, you know, value engineering and all that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess the question is, do we want to exclude the variance on whatever that was, B? I don't have my sheet out.
B little I.
That would make it have to go with the standard that we adopted by city council, which we've already kind of addressed. So do we want to go with what we talked about on that as being a standard, or giving them a variance from the standard?
Would you like to make a motion? Roger?
I move that we accept their proposal, except for the variance for building materials, BI or B1.
So you would waive B?
No, I would not waive it. No,
That's the one he wouldn't waive, yeah.
it was accept their proposal except for
Waive A and
waiving,
C and
waiving
The others
B1.
on the
Deny
other
B.
pages. Yeah.
Waive an A and C then, right?
Yeah, it was accept all the rest of the proposal.
And that's not the final word, right? Like this, if it ends up that makes this project financially unfeasible because you don't feel like you could market and sell these, there's always you know,
Multiple steps to
yeah.
get.
But I think we'd have a hard time backing off of these, so.
But we could, right?
Yeah, it still has to go to city council.
Right.
So, get
Anyway,
a
that was
recommendation from
my
you all.
proposal, I guess.
So
Motion.
state that motion for Brody so we can take a,
Okay.
in a second.
I move that we accept the proposal by the applicant as is, except for we would reject the variance on building materials, BI on here.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Is that too much? That's okay. Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cash? Mr. Duba?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith? Yes. Mr. Ambergy?
yes.
Thank you. Okay, this brings us now to old or new business.
Is this a me thing?
Yes.
So the old business is a request from JA Development. Oh, for a waiver of a percentage of the park impact fee for the development at Heritage Landing. The planned development is currently under construction on Lefferson. The applicant is proposing the construction of walking paths, benches, and small walking bridges along the eastern portion of the property. Space will be privately owned and maintained by the residents through an association. There will be 86 dwelling units in the community. The applicant is proposing using 7.26 acres of the 18.49 acres for private open space, which is approximately 39%. Here are some pictures of the the proposed walking trails, along with some of the green space on the back side of the development. So I believe that they're asking for a, just a moment, it's in this packet.
I think.
50% credit on units that aren't currently built. I believe there's 14 units already built. Is that, you can correct me. Got it, okay. Got it. Yeah, so, okay, so they've paid in full on some amount of the impact credit already, impact fee already, and are seeking a credit for 50% credit to be applied to future development. So under Development Code 1214, which is the parkland dedication and open space, the city may consider allowing for a credit for the creation of private open space in the event that the applicant provides that space is for park purposes, and which even if its access is, which may be restricted to future residents of the subdivision. As mentioned earlier, it will be privately owned and maintained by the development and either an association, either homeowners or property owners association. In the event that the Planning Commission determines that such private open space fulfills a portion of the park needs of the proposed subdivision, the market values of such areas as determined in this chapter shall be credited against the park impact fee required, and you all shall have the authority to determine whether the proposed private space or open space qualifies as a credit towards that park impact fee. There are a number of factors that you can consider, which are here. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but you can ultimately credit up to 50% because of the private open space that is there. So the staff recommends a decision on this be based on the application of the requirements of the Middletown Development Code. If approved, the applicant would receive a waiver of up to 50% of the park impact fee, waiver equal to the fair market value of the land proposed as open green space. The waiver would be applied to the remaining balance, which is owed, as indicated by Mr. Christo. So, I do not know what the amount is. I do not believe that an appraisal was conducted by city staff. There is a requirement, I believe, in the code that it can be done, but it was not. There's not been an appraisal done at this point. But you are able to, I think, just by the size of the land and the cost of the impact fee amount, I believe that a waiver of up to 50% would certainly be within the bounds of the appraised value. So, any questions for me that I can mumble through? This is not the first time you guys have considered this, right? It is old business.
I believe this is the first time I've seen this.
Okay.
I think the plan was, the PUD was probably approved a while ago.
Yeah.
I remember
But-
we worked
It's just coming back on the credit.
yeah.
On the credit.
And we've seen it on other developments.
Yeah, this is not, yeah.
So this is behind Lowe's, right? This is the new units going in behind Lowe's and below that big church, the big round church.
Yeah, Heritage Landing.
I just looked, so I know where it is now.
I know in prior requests, we've always, staff many times would give us some type of financial impact. There'd be some.
Yeah, that'd be a great thing to consider in this.
So it's kind of hard, 50%, it's like I can't, I don't really,
There was an appraisal submitted.
okay.
I was not given an appraisal and was told that an appraisal wasn't done.
So,
So certainly can get that to you all. That doesn't do anything for you right now. Timing wise, if we had to wait another, I think your regular meeting is coming up in 3 or 4 weeks, right? In August. Is that going to be a deal breaker? I'm going to have you come up again. I'm sorry.
Do we need the number to?
Typically we
do this.
do, only because it's hard for us to really say with any level, it's completely arbitrary
Yeah.
at this point. I mean,
Yeah, but
we are
at
going,
what point do we say it's too much, or too little?
I mean, I would.
We don't know the budgets for the city.
Right, yeah, again, I mean, I feel like I'm just making an arbitrary decision here. I mean, you know, in most
It would be
cases.
nice to know how much
it would be
money we're
nice.
waiving. Yeah.
But I would say this on the record to you. I mean, I think it's reasonable to ask for some, impact. I think that's certainly reasonable to do that here. I just don't know if I'd be comfortable saying, hey, at 50% sounds like a go. I don't even know what that would translate to. And
In numbers, I mean, so appraisal was submitted. I worked with James for the entire property. It was appraised at $990,000. So, I mean, he has receipt of that, and we're already up once on this, and I'm trying to remember what happened. Planning Commission wasn't ready to hear it. I don't remember what happened, so it got booted, and I can't remember.
Didn't have a quorum that night, yeah.
Or something. So this is the second time we're back and looking at this. And so the park fee, I believe, is it $500 per unit?
I believe that's right.
And so the whole premise of and Nathan, I was talking to him, and that's where he got me thinking on this. And the whole premise of this park fee waiver is to put money and encourage use of open, making green space, walking paths, exactly what we're doing here, and to have some offset to that cost. Now, that won't barely contribute to the cost of putting the trails, bridges, and of course maintaining that. And you can get up to a 50% waiver. And again, in all fairness to when you have density product like this, if this was a residential development, the fee's the same, whether you have 80 units on 8 acres or 8 units. So it's a little bit of a tax on density, if you want to call it, for the acreage. But what we've done here is created it's right along Dix Creek. I mean, a really nice trail. I think it lives up to the whole concept. This whole park waiver fee was created to encourage this, and then to give the developer incentive and some offset to the costs involved in installing this infrastructure.
Yeah.
So is it,
The park fee, impact fee is $500 per dwelling unit. There's 86 dwelling units in this development, which would be 43,000. So the credit would be the 21.5, which is if the appraisal. I believe you that you sent an appraisal. I just didn't. I asked and was told that there wasn't one.
Well, you can make that contingent. You could make this contingent upon getting that appraisal.
Yeah, sure. So the appraisal matters because you can't give more of a credit than the appraised value, which
won't even come.
but clearly that won't happen.
that's right.
So,
That's right.
I mean, I think we can all rest assured that the appraisals can come back at more than that, right?
More than $21,000 for
right.
Yeah.
So the appraisal is probably irrelevant.
Sure. Not irrelevant, but
Well,
I think we get
In this case.
yeah.
Agreed.
in this-
Not irrelevant.
yeah. But certainly-
$21,500 is how much we would be taking away from parks by granting this.
Yeah, and again, if you look at the kind of the factors that you're going to consider, for some reason they're not on here, which makes no sense to me. But they're location, size, accessibility, topography, and then proposed improvements are what you guys are considering. So
And you just cost me $250,000 on extra brick, so I mean it'd be a nice little offset.
no quid pro quos here.
Hard bargain around here.
And by the way, developing this, I've made a lot of friends down there. There was a homeless encampment down there. It was crazy. I met 3 of them down there. I don't think they're happy with us right now, but so, all right, thank you.
Okay. Well, since we got some numbers here to work with. Seems pretty reasonable, so. Anyone, any other questions, or anyone want to make a motion? Do we need them? Yeah, I guess we do.
We would need a vote,
Yeah, we
yeah,
need a motion
to
and a
approve.
second.
A
Make a
motion.
motion that we accept the proposal, even though you won't let me walk on the walking trail.
No quid pro quos.
It's only a problem if someone calls the police
There you
for
go.
trespassing.
So Mr. Daniel made the motion. Do we have a second? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Brian.
Okay, Mr. Daniel,
Yes,
Mr. Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Cash, Mr. Duba,
Yes.
Ms. Griffith, Mr. Ambergy,
Yes.
That brings us to adjournment. Thank you for a great meeting, guys. Thank you.
yep. We'll see you again, I'm sure.